The Rescue. The Cowardly Lion was much pleased to hear that the Wicked Witch had been melted by a bucket of water, and Dorothy unlocked the gate of his prison and set him free. Dorothy's first act was to call all the Winkies together and tell them they were no longer slaves. There was great rejoicing among the yellow Winkies, for they had been made to work hard during the many years for the Wicked Witch, who had always treated them with great cruelty. They kept this day as a holiday then and ever after, and spent the time in feasting and dancing. "If our friends the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman were only with us," said the Lion, "I should be quite happy." "Don't you suppose we could rescue them?" asked the girl anxiously. "We can try," answered the Lion. So they called the yellow Winkies and asked them if they would help them rescue their friends, and the Winkies said that they would be delighted to do all in their power for Dorothy, who had set them free from bondage. So she chose a number of Winkies, and they all started away. They traveled that day and part of the next until they came to the rocky plain where the Tin Woodman lay, all battered and bent. His axe was rusted and the handle broken off short. The Winkies lifted him tenderly in their arms and carried him back to the castle. When they reached the castle, Dorothy said to the Winkies, "Are any of your people tinsmiths?" "Oh, yes, some of us are very good tinsmiths," they told her. "Then bring them to me," she said, and when the tinsmiths came, she inquired, "Can you straighten out those dents in the Tin Woodman and solder him together where he is broken?" The tinsmith looked at the woodman over carefully and replied that they thought they could mend him so he would be as good as ever. So they set to work in one of the big rooms of the castle and worked for 3 days and 4 nights, hammering and bending and soldering and polishing the Tin Woodman until at last he was straightened out into his old form. To be sure, there were several patches on him, but the tinsmith did a good job. When at last he walked into Dorothy's room and thanked her for rescuing him, he was so pleased that he wept tears of joy, and Dorothy had to wipe every tear carefully from his face with her apron, so his joints would not be rusted. Her own tears fell thick and fast at the joy of meeting her old friend again. As for the Lion, he wiped his eyes so often with the tip of his tail that it became quite wet, and he was obliged to go out in the sun till it dried. "If we only had the Scarecrows with us again," said the Tin Woodman. When Dorothy had finished telling him everything that had happened, "We must try to find him," said the girl. So she called the Winkies to help her, and they walked all that day and part of the next until they came to the tall tree in the branches of which the winged monkeys had tossed the Scarecrow's clothes. Now, while the tinsmiths had been at work mending the woodman, another of the Winkies had made an axe handle of solid gold and fitted it to the woodman's axe. Instead of the old broken handle, the woodman began to chop, and in a short time the tree fell over with a crash, whereupon the Scarecrow's clothes fell out of the branches and rolled off on the ground. The Winkies carried them back to the castle, where they were stuffed with nice clean straw, and behold! Here was the Scarecrow, as good as ever, thanking them over and over again for saving him. Now that they were reunited, Dorothy and her friends spent a few happy days at the castle. But one day the girl thought of Aunt Em, who said, "We must go back and claim his promise." "Yes," said the woodsman, "at last I shall get my heart." "And I shall get my brains," added the Scarecrow joyfully. "And I shall get my courage," said the Lion thoughtfully. "And I shall get back to Kansas," cried Dorothy, clapping her hands. "Oh, let us start for the Emerald City tomorrow." The next day they bade the Winkies good-bye. The Winkies were sorry to have them go, and they had grown so fond of the Tin Woodman that they begged him to stay and rule over them. Finding they were determined to go, the Winkies gave Toto and the Lion each a golden collar, and to Dorothy they presented a beautiful bracelet studded with diamonds, and to the Scarecrow they gave a gold-headed walking stick to keep him from stumbling, and to the Woodman they offered a silver oil can inlaid with gold and set with precious jewels. Dorothy went to the witch's cupboard to fill her basket with food for the journey, and there she saw the golden cap. She tried it on her own head and found that it fitted her exactly. She did not know anything about the charm of the golden cap, but she saw that it was pretty, so she made up her mind to wear it and carry her sun bonnet in the basket. Then they all started for the Emerald City, and the Winkies gave them 3 cheers and many good wishes to carry with them. You will remember there was no road, not even a pathway between the castle of the Wicked Witch and the Emerald City. The travelers knew, of course, they must go straight east, toward the rising sun, but at noon, when the sun was over their heads, they did not know which was east and which was west, and that was the reason they were lost in the great fields. They kept on walking, but one by one they lost heart, even Dorothy. She sat down on the grass and looked at her companions, and they sat down and looked at her, and Toto panted and looked at Dorothy as if to ask what they should do next. "Suppose we call the field mice," she suggested. "They could probably tell us the way to the Emerald City." Dorothy blew the little whistle she carried since the Queen of the Mice had given it to her. In a few minutes they heard the pattering of tiny feet, and many of the small gray mice had come running up to her. Among them was the Queen, who asked, "What can I do for you, my friends?" "We have lost our way," said Dorothy. "Can you tell us where the Emerald City is?" "Certainly," answered the Queen, "but it's a great way off." When she noticed Dorothy's golden cap, "Why don't you use the charm of the cap and call the winged monkeys to you? They will carry you to the City of Oz in less than an hour." "I didn't know there was a charm," answered Dorothy in surprise. "It is written inside the golden cap," replied the Queen of the Mice. "Don't be afraid. They won't hurt you. They must obey the wearer of the cap. Goodbye!" And she scampered out of sight, with all the mice hurrying after her. Dorothy looked inside the golden cap and saw some words written upon the lining. She read the directions carefully and put the cap upon her head. Then she spoke the charm to summon the winged monkeys. They heard a great chattering and flapping of wings as the band of winged monkeys flew up to them. The king bowed low before Dorothy and asked, "What is your command?" "We wish to go to the Emerald City," said the child, "and we have lost our way." "We will carry you," replied the king. 2 of the monkeys caught Dorothy in their arms and flew away with her. Others took the frightened Scarecrow and the Woodman and the Lion, and one little monkey seized Toto and flew after them. The strange creatures soon set the travelers down carefully before the gate of the city. The king bowed to Dorothy and then flew swiftly away, followed by all his band.